Welcome, Nathan, to the World XP podcast. It's a pleasure to have you on. We don't know each other personally, like most of the other guests that I have on, but I was watching some comedy stuff on YouTube, and your new special popped up in the algorithm, and I clicked on it, decided to give it a go, and I was rolling after about 5 minutes, and I saw your subscribers, and it wasn't super high, so I was like, maybe I have a chance to get them on, but here you are. Welcome.
Thanks, Eric. It's a pleasure to be here, and I appreciate you reaching out.
Yeah, for sure. So I think just for everybody listening, the title of your special is Great Enough, right? It's out now on YouTube. You can find it Nathan Habib Comedy. And then, of course, we'll put all those links down in the description and stuff below. But definitely go check them out. It's hilarious. Yeah. So you've been a comic now for about how long?
I would say like about a little over a decade.
Really? Okay. So that's cool. That's cool because I've seen... on, like we were talking before, I've been watching Kill Tony for a little while now, and you see every sort of person ever go up on that show, whether like they've been doing it like it's their first time, or they've been doing it for 10 years or like 2 years or whatever, and all the like every walk of person is on that show. And so it made me kind of into a stand-up fan. So I've been kind of curious about stand up for a little while. So I'm really excited for the opportunity to ask you questions and talk to you specifically about the writing process. Was the one that really kind of makes me think. But I want to start off with like, how'd you get started? Because some like people are funny. Like I don't consider myself super funny, but if there's a conversation, I'll have like a one-liner here or there. And then somebody be like, "Oh, you're funny," and I'd be like, "Yeah, but I'm not stand-up funny because I don't have stuff like you have to create your own things to go off of." So, like, how did you get into it?
Yeah, for sure. There's definitely a big difference between just being like off the cuff funny with your friends versus being on demand funny on stage in front of strangers. So I grew up in a family where it was a funny family. Like they enjoyed cracking jokes with one another. They enjoyed watching like funny comedy sketches. So it was kind of like part of our culture. That being said, though, really what happened was one night I was watching TV. I was like 14 years old, and I was turning on Comedy Central not to see stand-up, but to see something else. And then all of a sudden, I see this guy like on stage by himself, just talking. And it was the first time in my life where I was like alone in a room, and I was just like howling, like just laughing so hard. And it wasn't off of like slapstick comedy. It wasn't a cartoon. It wasn't a funny movie. I wasn't with a bunch of friends. I was alone, and it was just a person talking. And it almost felt like a magic show where I was like, how did he do that? You know, like how did he like take complete control over me as a kid?
Yeah.
And so I saw one episode, like one show, and then I just started watching more and more and more stand-up. And again, I didn't even know what it was. I was literally just like, this is on at around like 7 p.m. on a Friday. I'll watch it and I'll just laugh my ass off.
Yeah.
So I started doing that. Then I started like telling my parents what I watched on TV. Like I would like recite the jokes and they would laugh, and I would do it at the dinner table and they would laugh. And so I was like, whoa, like this is a really cool art form. Flash forward to high school, freshman year of high school, I had to sign up for an art elective. And I knew I didn't want to draw. I knew I didn't want to play an instrument. So another option was theater. And so on the first day of class, I went up to the teacher after class and I was like, yo, like, are we going to get to do that thing where there's a person on stage and they like say funny stuff and the audience laughs? And she was like, that's called stand up. And we will not do that. But if you want to do that, we have like a talent show, like an open mic at the school. You can sign up for it and do it then. So I was like, all right, I'm down. But then I was also like, wait, I don't have any material. Like, I don't know what actually to do, you know? And so she was like, Miss Hawkins is her name. So she was like, come to my office during lunch. We'll work on your material and then you'll perform on the night of the open mic. And bear in mind, like, this open mic thing is like typically like only like senior theater people would do it, you know, not like freshman kids. So I would go to her class like every like week or so during lunch. I was such a nerd, right? Like all my friends are like playing basketball or whatever. I'm out here like in a teacher's class writing jokes. And so whatever, I wrote the material, it was like 5 minutes. We do the open mic, it's packed, it's all 18-year-old adults, right? They're all seniors. I'm this like 15-year-old kid, 14-year-old kid. And I get on stage and I vividly remember like getting on stage and like just kind of starting to get into my set, like not really even like getting into my set. And the crowd kind of like chuckled. Like there was like some mild laughter.
Yeah.
And at that moment, I was like, whoa, like I think I'm about to blow these people's minds. And look, like I'm sure the material was garbage back in the day, like, you know, but like in that show, like I crushed, like I had them laughing. And I just remember like the spotlight in my face and like a bunch of like people just laughing. And I also like controlled when they stopped laughing. And it was just this like crazy rush of adrenaline and also just like power. And then I got off stage and like probably like one of the hottest girls in school like came up to me, gave me a hug. And you know, like I'm this like 14-year-old kid, like she's got boobs. Like I'm just like, holy shit, like this is crazy, you know, like so at that moment I was just kind of like, there's nothing that compares. Like this is so much fun. This is so cool. I'm gonna do this forever, you know. So that's basically how it all went down.
Yeah, and you were hooked from there, weren't you?
For sure.
That's wild. Yeah, of course. When you're like a 14-year-old and like that hot girl that you have a crush on comes, it's like, I'm gonna try and do this every single time just to get this reaction. Oh,
and
that's
I've never
wild.
hooked up with a girl after a show. So, you know, the math doesn't work out that way, but it is what it is.
Yeah, for sure. That's crazy because I know every comic, like most other professions that are similar to comedy is not the right word, but where you kind of, it's just you. Everyone's kind of got their own origin story. So that's quite interesting that you picked it up that early and you tried it that early, because I've heard a lot of stories of people like trying it when they're 21, 22 at a open mic like afterwards. But you were already in. So did you do it throughout high school then?
Yeah, man. So I pretty much was doing it throughout high school. It wasn't as consistent. You know, a lot of times comedians will ask you like, how long have you doing stand-up? And it's a very complicated question because you could technically be doing stand-up for like 20 years, but only do like one show a month, you know, and then it's like, are you, so, you know, I wasn't very consistent, but I think what was important about that entire like experience during high school and college is like, I was embedded in the San Francisco Bay Area comedy scene. And so I was like building connections like very slowly but thoroughly over time. And I think that really helped a lot like once I graduated from college, because I've already kind of laid down the foundation of like the networks. And then opportunities started coming in terms of like more stage time and getting acclimated in like really cool clubs. But yeah, I think it also allowed me to like be really bad really early. Like, you know, I think that's really important as well. So yeah, it started getting a little bit more consistent like after college.
Yeah, that makes sense. I've also heard comedians talk about the importance of bombing. And so for you, like when you were doing it at that, like for me personally, I was really bad at giving presentations when I like up through high school, and then in college I got a little bit more comfortable because I think I was more comfortable with myself and what I was doing like in front of people. But for you, did you like, so you were doing it super early, but so did that learning curve take place like early, or were you kind of in a standpoint where you were doing it for like parents at talent shows and like other things? And so I don't want to say the crowd is like more forgiving, but at the same time, like it's a little bit more forgiving than you following like an established stand-up rather than some kid that can't play the piano.
100%. That's such a good perspective to have on that. I think it's like a blessing and a curse. I was definitely in the beginning in an environment where it was a lot more supportive. I think that's a blessing because it like built up a really big confidence that I might not have had if I started a little later. And it was like with more like, that being said, I was like in generic bars and clubs every now and then. I think also it could be a curse because like, you know, I think I was really going for like the laugh in the beginning versus like the voice. And I think that's kind of where I'm at right now is like, I think in the past I was finding pleasure doing stand-up by getting the laugh. It's like just being like, wow, like I want to crush so I can get everyone to just like be roaring and laughing and being on my side. That's such a good feeling. But I think I've gotten to a point now where it's transitioned to, I want to make sure that what I say on stage is unique, has a purpose, there's a meaning to it, and I'm like invested in it. And then hopefully the claps will come after that. So I don't know if that answers your question, but like that's kind of like the transition, I think, from the beginning of like going for the laugh versus like now it's more going for whatever I want to talk about and hoping that the crowd kind of like comes along with the ride.
Yeah, that makes sense, especially as a maturation process for you. That makes total sense, because I think a lot of people think it's just about getting laughs, and then they don't. So I've only realized this in the last like month, because after in COVID, like I had more free time, so I kind of dove into like different stand-ups and like what it kind of entails. And sometimes I don't like that I did that, because I'll listen for like an analytical rather than just to enjoy it, and that's kind of like I get annoyed with myself afterwards. Because but I've noticed that some of like the younger ones, or the ones who haven't been doing it as long, will go for, especially like on a like in a comedy club setting or whatever, they'll go for like what they think people will think is funny, and the more established ones will talk about what they want to talk about and make it funny. And there's like a subtle difference there that I didn't pick up on it until very recently. But I think what I was trying to get at more was like when you like, so you're in a supportive environment and maybe you don't bomb as much, and then so like when you bomb at a club, is that worse? Like, is the teardown worse because you'd been in that environment where you're like, oh, this is funny because it worked with these people, and then you went to a different place and it didn't work at all?
Yeah, I mean, look, like a bomb is never comfortable. It doesn't really matter what the setting is. I mean, I would say the worst bomb is probably when you're performing in front of what is supposed to be a supportive audience and then you're bombing. That's when you know you're just like not. Like I remember one show, dude, this was like such a nightmare. Like I remember this was when I was really young, like still, I think I was still in high school or whatever. My mom was like getting like really excited about me doing stand-up. So she was like, she was almost like my like agent, you know, like trying to get me gigs and stuff, but it was like super embarrassing. She like had some sort of like all women's get together party thing or whatever. And it was like this outdoor pool party. I don't know. Anyway, she thought it would be like a good idea for me to do stand-up, right? So like I'm out here like holding this microphone that like the cord doesn't even like extend all the way. So I'm like holding the microphone like this, you know? And like it's outside during the day. There's like a pool in front of me. And then like just a bunch of moms just kind of like standing around. Like no one's even, it's just like standing around. And it's like, dude, this is how bad I bombed. No one was laughing. And in the middle of my set, if you could even call it that, a woman came up to me, grabbed the microphone from me, and was like, if someone is driving a white Toyota, you are blocking me from leaving the party. It's a white Toyota. Please move your car. I need to leave. Thank you. And then she like handed me the microphone. And I was like, so, and like, it was a nightmare. So, you know, I think bombing in general, like sucks. It's always like jarring, but I think the more you do it, the more you get comfortable with the bomb. I think that's like an art form in itself, is like, and for me, it like comes in waves. Like sometimes I have these like phases where nothing could phase me. It's like, I don't even care if I'm bombing. I know it's like growth. It's all good. Then there are phases where I'm just kind of like, wow, I'm really uncomfortable on the stage right now. And it doesn't really matter what the setting is, because ultimately it's like, you know, you're on a stage and there's an audience in front of you.
Yeah, that makes sense. Obviously the goal is not to bomb, but
well, sometimes I mean, sorry to cut you off, but like that's the thing, is like sometimes the goal is not to bomb, but like sometimes it is inevitable. Like you will go on stage knowing you're gonna bomb. And the reason you know you're gonna bomb is because you're trying new material, like you're trying this new thing. So for example, like I just did my special, that's an hour of material. I don't want to say that material ever again. So now I'm starting over. Right. And when you start over, you kind of have to admit to yourself, like, okay, like I genuinely do not know if these jokes are funny or not. So the chances of me bombing are really, really high. But that's literally the only way for me to eventually get these jokes to be superb.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you're in that position like you're in now, maybe, so how do you deal with that? You know you're not certain of the material you have, but a big part I feel like of being on stage, at least when I was giving presentations, was confidence in the material that I was presenting, whether it was at like a conference or like whatever the case may be. It was like if I knew the material and I knew it was like I was confident in it, it made me more comfortable on stage. The delivery, everything was just better
Right.
performance wise. So for you, how do you deal with that going on stage knowing like this is new stuff and you know that you're not sure if it's going to work? Like how do
Yeah,
you overcome that?
that's a really good question. So I think as a performer, there are two things. There's the content of what you're saying, and then there's you.
Mm-hmm.
And the audience will appreciate the content for sure, but the audience will also like appreciate you as a person and the energy that you carry and like your aura, if you will. And yeah, like in a perfect setting where the product is done, the ideal situation is where you have your content A level and yourself A level. But sometimes it's just not ready yet. Like comedians don't always have the finished product ready to go for presentation. So in terms of like how you deal with it, for me, it's more of just getting into a mindset of like, I am funny, like I'm funny. Like, yes, it would be nice to have like good content that's polished and sharp and the word economy is amazing. I don't really have that right now. I'm working on it. But at the same time, like I'm a funny person. So, you know, hopefully the audience can see that by like the energy and the confidence that I bring into it. Like either through crowd work or maybe just like talking through like my new joke. So like for example, I have a girlfriend, we've been dating for 7 months. We just went on our first like big trip together. We were in Mexico together and we had like a few moments of like things that went wrong and things that I think could be kind of funny. I wrote some material about it, but it's not, I don't think it's that good. Like, I don't think it's that polished. But when I talk to my friends on the phone about the trip, they're like dying laughing on the phone.
Yeah.
And they're laughing because of like, because I'm funny and like the way I'm talking about it is funny. So I need to like take that energy and bring it on stage. And hopefully the crowd will be like, yeah, like none of this is like polished, I can tell, but he's just talking to us. Like he's just like a funny guy telling us how Mexico was.
Yeah, that makes sense. I have so many questions off that. It's nuts.
Please.
All right.
Yeah.
So the first one is like, so I guess it helps then that you know that the premise of the joke is funny, even if it's not polished. Like you've got enough confidence in yourself and the material around the joke that you're good to go on stage, even if the words are not exactly how you want them. So that's cool. And then the other thing that I really admire about that sort of process is, so for me, I'm a soccer player, and this analogy might not work perfectly, but in my head it works. It's like if I'm going to try a new move, you can practice it as much as you want with no defenders, but you're not really going to know if it works until you're in the game and you try and do it. And so there's a certain like level of like practicing while you're performing that I really like for a comic is way more than like that situation in soccer. Like no one's gonna like, okay, the defender took the ball, it's fine. But like for you, it's in front of everybody, and it's like only you. Like whereas I have teammates to help me on the field. So when you're working that stuff out, like I guess it's not so much a question, but more just thoughts. When you're working that stuff out, like are you thinking on the fly? Like you have your premise written out and maybe the crowd reacts to a certain part of the premise and then you switch where you were going a little bit. Do you do that often?
Yeah. So I think it's always good to like come with, like, you always want to come with something prepared. Right. And
Sure.
so, like, I would say if I want to play it somewhat safe, I would maybe like do one or two jokes, one or two quick jokes up top that I know work. And that are also like fun to do, that are just like fun for me to like perform. And that kind of and then like I'll know they'll laugh and it'll also put me in kind of like a silly, goofy mood.
Yeah.
and like a loose mood. So, and I've like earned their trust, right? So like, hopefully all that can be done in like 30 seconds to like a minute.
Hmm.
And then the rest of the set is very like, all right, I got like 3 premises that I thought about. Here's like why the premise is kind of unique, or like the point of view is a little unique. Also, like, here are like the words that I think could get the laugh. And let's just kind of like talk this out. It's going to be messy. It's going to be jumbly. I'm probably not going to say it the best way, but let's just do it. And each time I'll do it, I'll only get better and better and better. And listen, like sometimes there's something that you think is legit and you do it like 20 times and the audience is just not laughing at all. And you're like, all right, like I thought it was something, I guess it's not, we'll move on. And then just to keep things professional and smooth, like you can end on a joke that you already know works as well, that's polished. So that way you have like a beautiful kind of like bow to your set. But that middle ground, the middle ground is important in the sense that like your audience will give you the permission to mess up because they've already decided in their head, I like this guy. Like they've already decided, like, I like this person based on the minute that he went on stage. Like I've already decided in my brain that I like this person, whether or not his material is sharp or that good in the beginning or in the middle, I'll let that slide because I'm still having a good time with this guy. And that's kind of like the way I think to grow with the material when it's still pretty fresh.
Yeah, I've noticed that on Kill Tony before with certain like his regulars, for instance, if they like they're trying stuff out all the time with that, and it might not like I won't laugh, but then they'll make a joke about them messing up and they'll get laughs with it. And if somebody else comes on that doesn't have that same like vibe and they mess up as well, it's just crickets. And it's like there's not really a kind of thing that you can put your finger on that's like this is why that worked and this is why this didn't. It's just like that person's kind of vibe and like aura, I guess.
Yeah, man. I mean, yeah, like I have shows where it just feels off, and I could like say like all my best material, but maybe my energy is not there. Maybe it's like a really late night and I'm tired and like the energy is off and like crowds can really sense that. And the opposite is also true. Like when you're super loose on stage and you just don't care, the audience is like so attracted to it. And those are often like the most fun shows. But yeah, again, like I think what people don't realize also is like a comedian will have their own agenda going into their set. So sometimes my friends will be like, yeah, I saw this comedian, he was garbage, he wasn't that good. And it'll be some like world-renowned comedian, right? But what they might not understand is like, well, maybe this world-renowned comedian just retired their good material and is like starting over. Or maybe they don't care at all about being present with the audience. Maybe all they care about is delivering these written jokes because they have to do like a late night set and there's no like crowd work in a late night set. So I think sometimes the audiences like don't realize that the comedian is working on their own thing, whatever that might be.
Do certain, so off of that, you mentioned like crowd energy and stuff. Are there different types of, okay, I was gonna say, are there different types of crowds? Obviously the answer is yes, but like, are there more, I guess more educated crowds, if that makes sense, like that understand that you're working out material versus crowds that just maybe think you're bad? Or like how do you kind of navigate that when you're going through and like can you tell beforehand maybe if there's a comic that went up before you and you knew that he was working out material and they reacted one way or the other? Like how does that work for you?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it might like depend like what scene you're in, like what city and whatnot. Like I think some cities, stand-up is like really predominant, right? Like New York, like I'm in New York and like there's like stand-up comedy everywhere in New York. And so I think there are those audiences of like, we are comedy fans. Like we love like these kind of comedians or these comedians. So we want to see them live. And we know because we listen to their podcast or whatever, like we know that they're like working new material and we love seeing that process. Like there's definitely some of that. But I think for me personally, like I don't really like focus on like what kind of audience are we dealing with. Like I don't really, I think anytime you go through that, like you start being less true to what you want to talk about. Like
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm at a point right now where it's only fun for me on stage if I talk about what I want to talk about. And if that means that I might bomb or it's not going to resonate with the crowd, that's fine, because I know that if I was just going to do like my best material and get laughs, I won't be present. I won't really care. I'll be in my head the whole time and it won't be
Mm-hmm.
exciting for me.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm the same way with this almost. We don't really have a live audience or anything, but like if it's there's sometimes I'll get bored in the conversation because I was like, this is not where I wanted it to go, and this person's off on this tangent or that tangent, and I'm like I can tell in myself like I have to like be consciously make a conscious effort to like keep things going. Um, yeah, no, that makes total sense. Whew. All right, writing process. So how does that work? How does that work for you? Well, I guess I'll just leave it open ended there because I know nothing about writing
Yeah.
jokes.
Yeah. This one is a beast. Um, so you asked me, hey, like the special, right? Was that kind of like off the cuff, or was that, how much was written, and
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you that I have a transcript on Google Doc, word for word of that special.
Sheesh.
Like every single word of that YouTube special, the all 54 minutes of it or whatever, every single word is in that Google Doc. And if that like surprises people, then I did my job, right?
Yeah.
But I think the way it works is this. It's one of these things where I can like, do you want to know like the process from like very beginning to very end?
Uh, well, yes, I would like to know that as well, but also just generally like when. So yes, well, yeah, we'll go with that, and then I'll ask
Cool.
the other question afterwards.
Okay. So this is how it gets born, right? Like you have an experience, like whether it's traveling with your girlfriend or walking down the street, you see something weird or something frustrating, like you have an experience. And that experience is either new or frustrating or just amazing, but it's got to be like something that sparks something. That's why it's important for comedians as well to like not just like travel and perform, right? You need to
Mm-hmm.
like do shit. Anyways, so um if that happens, I pull out my phone and I use the notes app and I'll just write like in a sentence, like I'll just put, like I'll be specific, right? So in the Mexico thing, we got to Mexico, we wanted to rent a car. We got there and my girlfriend accidentally rented a manual car, like a stick.
Mm-hmm.
And and then the thing that I thought that was like ridiculously funny is instead of my girlfriend like calling Avis to like cancel the order or whatever, she like Googled how to drive stick. And
That
I
is
was
funny.
like, yeah, I was like, but like in the moment, you're not laughing. In the
Yeah,
moment, you're
yeah.
kind of like stressed and you're kind of like, what the fuck are you doing? Um, and I remember being like, babe, like, I'm just telling you right now, like, I'm not getting in a car with you that stick in Mexico. Like, I can confirm you that's not gonna. So whatever. So we had that like altercation or whatever. But then, so that night, I like immediately, or maybe even an hour later, I pulled out my phone and I was like, girlfriend, Googling how to drive stick in Mexico. Like that was something interesting and unique or whatever. Okay, so whatever, you kind of like let that sit and then you let your brain kind of do whatever, you experience other things. Then I take like time out of my day. I like get to my desk, I pull out my computer and I just start like typing about that experience. Not necessarily trying to like be funny, but just throw up as much as I can, like about that moment. So it's more of like free writing, if you will. Then after that, I'll actually treat it as like a poem, like line by line. You can almost think of it as like rap lyrics, right? So, and it's actually like the font is bigger on the Google Doc, and it truly is like a line. So the font is like 14 font, and the reason I have it like that, and the reason I write line by line is because if I'm writing a setup or a punchline, and the line goes over one line, like it goes to the second line, I know that my wording is too wordy It's like all jumbly and stuff. I want it to be like super sharp. So at that point, I'm like, I can visually see it. So I visually see that my setup is like 2 lines. And maybe in my setup, I have like 1 or 2 funny words in there. And then like, okay, let's make sure that by the 3rd line, like I have a punchline. Like, let's not take forever to get to the punchline. So that's kind of the writing process in the beginning, is like, okay, let's make sure I have like something that's formatted as a joke, kind of. Then I go on stage and I will kind of introduce it in a very improv-y way. Like I'll just kind of talk it out initially, not to come off like robotic, and maybe something will just spark while I'm on stage. But then I'll eventually actually get to that joke. I'll actually get to that very specific thing that I wrote. And if the reaction is positive, then it's like, okay, cool. I have like a little chunk. Like I have like a minute, right? Or maybe like 30 seconds. Now, how do I build onto that 30 seconds, right? Like, how do I continue on to this 30 seconds? So I'll go back to my desk and maybe like make it a little bit longer, and type a little, go back on stage and say that second part. Oh, the second part didn't get any laughs. All right, let's just use the first part and try to think of something else. So it's extremely tedious. And again, like, it can take me months just to nail down like a 30-second joke for it to be like perfect. And then sometimes you'll write a joke and you'll say it for months and it's funny, but then like, dude, there was one joke I thought about, like I figured out how to make it even better the night of the show, like the night of the recording of the special. I was like, holy shit, like I think I can like do this line even better. And it just comes like naturally. So obviously not every comedian is like this, right? Like some comedians don't write at all, and they just kind of like talk on stage and they record their sets and they memorize what they should say and say it. But for me, it's like I like to be very prepared just in general in life.
Sure.
And so it's comforting for me to know that I have like an actual script, so that way I know when the set is done and I can do another recording.
But you've got it straight from memory. So like by the time the special comes out, like you're kind of just rolling with it. Even though you said every single word that's on the Google Doc, it's not like you're reading right from it.
For sure. And the Google Doc is more, the Google Doc is more to see what my progress is like. And you're right, like I would say 2 months before my special, all of my sets were me just going through that Google Doc in my head. Like we talk about, hey, like comedians being present and confident or whatever. That was when I was not present on stage, because my intention was only to like rehearse for this special. So if the crowds didn't laugh or someone would talk in the audience, I would not care. Like I would just keep going through my thing, because like I was just preparing for the special.
Yeah, that makes total sense. It's given me like all this is like so much cool perspective when you're watching. Like I love the behind the scenes stuff of like most things, but like this is super cool. Actually, well, I remember there was one joke you had in the special about like your assistant and then not having enough money for it. And then you said like she should be my intern instead. And that did not get the laughs that I thought it should have got, because I thought that was hilarious.
Thanks, man.
Yeah. So when so when you're writing and you're like working stuff out, you've got your little, like, we'll say your 2 or 3 lines that you've written. Like your joke style is very like rhythmic almost. It's like one line, set up, punchline. All right, move to the next one, and we go. But there's other comedians that don't really do that. They're more like storytellers, but they have like jokes written in, I guess, if that makes sense. You kind of do that. You kind of do that as well. It's interesting to me to see like style to style, like how it all fits together. And so like when you're working things out, for example, like the Zambia joke when you said like when you said bordered to Wakanda, Like when you had that, because you added, I remember when I was listening to it today. So I'm rambling a little bit. I was listening to it today, and there was a couple of like ands and other words in there, because I was listening for things to ask you basically about how you wrote it out. And did you write it out to keep kind of that rhythm? Like, did you write it out in that way to keep like the rhythm kind of going on, like on purpose, or was that just kind of how it came out that night, or both? I don't know. That's a super specific question.
No, man, this is awesome. Like people might not realize that like stand-up comedy is music. Like, yeah, like there is a rhythm to comedy that makes humans laugh. There are certain like words and letters that hit harder versus others. So I don't know like how intentional I was in terms of my rhythm. That just might be like my voice, and I don't really like realize it yet. I think my focus is more just like keep it short and concise and get to the punchline as quickly as you can. But yeah, when I write, I definitely like mumble to myself, and I'm like, this is not the right rhythm. Like there's no rhythm here. Like it's too long, or it's not in the same pace that I'm usually used to. And that's why, again, I write in lines. It's poetry. It's like straight up rap music. It's like rap. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know how intentional that was with the Zambia joke, if I'm being honest.
I don't know either. It was just something I noticed, and I was like, maybe I'll ask him about it.
Yeah.
The reason
I love that you notice these things, by the way. I think it's so cool to get the outside perspective on something you've worked so long for, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Well, especially when I have guests on that I don't like. I have some guests on that I know, and it's just like a conversation because we're friends already, and like the rhythm is already there. But if I have somebody like yourself on, or somebody who I don't know who has like an area of expertise, I want to be prepared, because I don't want to come in and sound like an idiot, because I've done that. I've done that before, and that's not fun. When you were kind of coming up in the comedy scene, how long did it take you to find your sort of style? Like, for example, Shane Gillis has his special out live in Austin, and he covers like 4 things in the same amount of time that you do, 4 like subject material, like things. He's got like his dad watching Fox News, the Civil War, Special Olympics, and like one other thing, and then his Trump impersonation, and then you cover like so much more variety of subjects, but it's all like the jokes, kind of the rhythm is still there in everything. When you were coming up and writing and like finding out how you wanted to do, like, how did you figure out that that was the way that you wanted to go with it versus like the storyteller mode, or like versus some of the other ones, like Schultz is very crowd work centric, or like something like that?
Yeah, for sure. And by the way, like Schultz is like a huge inspiration on all this. He was giving me a lot of like tips on how to like make sure to do this right. But
I've heard that about him, that he's very helpful to like
he's
other
huge.
comics.
Yeah, he's like such a sweet guy. But you know, I'll be honest, man, like I think what I did in that special, I think it's just what I was comfortable with in terms of a comedian. Like I don't think I was comfortable to like say a story on stage, because with a story there's a lot of like silent beats and you're setting things up, and I don't know if I was comfortable with that yet. I do think it would be nice to evolve into a comedian that can share stories while making them really funny. I think if I am to grow as a comic, like I would want to see maybe my cadence, my pacing, my style evolve. Like I hope that when I do the special again, it'll look drastically different, because it'll mean that like, wow, Nathan can like do it all. Like Nathan can like say a story and make it hilarious and meaningful. Because in his last special, it was more just like jokey, kind of surface level stuff. Funny, but still kind of surface level.
Yeah.
I'm not one of those comics that like, I'm not a woke comic. I'm not like, I don't want my comedy to make a difference, you know?
Well,
But
I knew you weren't woke because you asked me if I was going to get you canceled.
yeah, yeah. Uh, yeah, like I'm just not like I think some comics like try to use their comedy as like a platform to create change, and like that's not what, like I'm just not wired that way. But I do want my material to be stuff that I'm like genuinely interested in as a human. And I think that's what I'm learning, what I'm working towards right now.
Yeah, that makes total sense as well. That's awesome. So interesting to me, all of it, because like once I start to watch it in a more analytic, like so when you're watching other comedians, like before you or after you at certain sets, like can you still are like enjoy it, or are you always listening to like the nuances of how they wrote this certain joke, or like, oh, this they dragged this part out a little bit longer so they could hit the punchline harder? That like, how does that work for you?
Yeah, I mean, I typically enjoy it, but yeah, I'll enjoy it for maybe different reasons, right? I'll enjoy
Mm-hmm.
it because I'm like, wow, like this person is witty as hell. Like I did not see that coming at all, and like I typically can see where that's going.
Yeah.
Um, so you can appreciate it in different ways. Like you can appreciate the comedian that's just like a prolific writer, and you're just kind of like, damn, like that is some good ass writing.
Mm-hmm.
And then every now and then, like there are these comics, like Matt Richards, for example. He's a comedian in New York, and like he's just a funny person. Like as a person, he's just funny, and like he does all these like voices and characters on stage,
Mm-hmm.
and you'll just sit in the back, and you're just like you can't help but laugh because it's just a cartoon on stage. Um, and so yeah, it really like depends. It's like sometimes there are times where like I'll be in the back of the club and I'll just like watch, and I'll be like, that was really funny, but I'm not going to laugh at all. Like I'm just like saying like that was really, really good.
Yeah.
And it's almost like psychotic, you know?
Yeah.
Um, but then yeah, and then sometimes you can't help yourself. There's just like some comedians that have this like crazy energy on stage and you're just like howling laughing.
When yeah, I've noticed that as well. I've started to do the like, oh, that was like really well written, and notice, and I like catch myself afterwards. I'm like, am I insane now? Or just like, should I? I need to be
But
laughing more.
isn't that crazy? Like in terms of like how stand-up comedy has evolved, right? Because a few years ago, like 20 years ago, 30 years ago, the only stand-up that you could consume is like the finished product from like the biggest people,
Mm-hmm.
right? And now stand-up is a lot more accessible to comedians, where like people like me and other comics can like produce a special. But that means that like there's such a bigger audience for stand-up, and there's a lot more people that are into it, but also content is delivered differently. So like it allows people to also enjoy the process of stand-up, which makes them be like, oh yeah, like I see what he did there, like that's pretty clever, or like, oh, I could tell he's like still working on his stuff. And that's such a drastic shift from like what we're used to, like with stand-up 20 years ago or 10 years ago even.
Yeah, I really like it a lot more now. I think consuming it in that way, because it lets you get involved. I think a lot of industries have kind of done that to a certain extent, let the behind the scenes come out a little bit. And I think for me personally, can't speak for everybody, obviously, but for me personally, it allows me to be more invested in kind of what's going on. So like, I think Mark Norman had released a couple of videos, him working out material, and like that was really cool because you get to see stuff that you don't normally get to see, like how they react to certain things and like how the crowd work goes. And that brings me to my next sort of question for you is how, when you do crowd work, well, I guess just how does that work? Because everybody's got their own style of doing it. So like for you.
Yeah, I love crowd work. It's like my favorite thing to do. I think a lot of times, like if I'm feeling like kind of like anxious on stage, or I feel like something's just kind of off, like I'll just go into crowd work
Mhm.
because it forces me to be fully present and like break the ice. Um, yeah, like I think for me, like the mindset with crowd work is curiosity. Like I genuinely like I'm genuinely curious about the audience member, or I'm genuinely curious about their opinion on what I'm talking about.
Mm.
So a lot of things I'm talking about right now is like relationship stuff because I'm in a relationship, and I'm thinking, dude, like I'm genuinely thinking a lot about like marriage and like how do you know when someone's the one, and like just like how to grow in a relationship and long-term like partnership, all this kind of stuff, right? Like I'm reading books about it and stuff. And so like I'll see like couples in the audience and I will like have a conversation with them on like, yo, like what, how did you know? Or like what works for you guys? And da, da, da. And and then at that point it's just kind of like being silly and fun with them. But I think the initial part of it has to be this like curiosity of like, this is a human, I'm a human. Let's explore things on each other.
Yeah, I think there has to be this like almost trust factor of like they know that you don't really mean what you're like, it's just a joke. Like if you're making fun of them, and they have to like know it's like they don't like you don't really mean to hurt them, and so you can kind of dive into this deeper, maybe like it wouldn't be socially acceptable way of like
Yeah.
you wouldn't say that if you just saw them on the street, but since you're in a place of like trust almost with them, that you can say it and then they can interact or however you do it. I know some people like don't like it well, but yeah, it's
Yeah.
different for everybody, but yeah.
And for me, honestly, like a lot of times the kind of crowd work that I love is like where I'm actually making fun of myself. Like
Mm-hmm.
I will actually set up the audience member where it actually makes me look bad.
Mm.
And I think the crowd like finds that even more impressive, where it's like, wow, like he is using this audience member as like an alley-oop for me to be the punching bag.
Yeah.
And that's also really fun too, right? Is to just like for me to be the vulnerable one. Um, and when you can be the vulnerable one first, it gives permission for everybody else to be vulnerable too.
Yeah, I hadn't looked at it that way. That makes a lot of sense. I guess yeah. And it's like that in most relationships, though. Actually, to be honest with it, it's like boss and employee, or like you in a relationship. I mean, like however it is, like if you can be vulnerable, it allows other people to kind of, and that comes from almost like a security in yourself or a maturity. Like you know who you are, you know what you're doing, you're confident up there, and so you can open that up, and then like the experience can grow from there, which is really cool. You have like, I feel like
Yeah.
there's a lot of special moments that come out of that.
I mean, that's why again, like the material that I'm saying is this like it's a material of like, hey man, I'm just learning right now. I'm like discovering all these things. I'm not really sure how any of this works. This is kind of what I found out. Hey, you in the front row, like, how have you like navigated this thing? And then they'll
Mm-hmm.
start talking, and then so listen, like it doesn't work every time, right? Like
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think every comedian has like nailed it every time, but when it works, it's like explosive. It's really fucking cool.
Yeah, because it's off the cuff and people know that. So like for me, when I'm watching, like when Schultz released his only crowd work special, that to me was like amazing because it's like he goes up there not unprepared, obviously, but like
Yeah.
as to come up with that much material off just kind of like winging it is like for me was super impressive.
Yeah. And I think again, it's like one of these things that people don't realize is um look, I don't this is a guess. Okay.
Sure.
So like he might have actually like got on stage and prepared that and like knew he was going to do that and was going to make it special. He's good enough to do that, you
Yeah.
know. Here's kind of what I think might have happened. Again, I'm
Sure.
guessing, I'm not saying this happened. I'm going to guess that he had a set
Mm-hmm.
and he was doing material or whatever. And then he just kind of like went into crowd work. And it was just one of these like magical nights that he was just on a roll, you know,
Yeah.
like he was just on a roll where the audience is just feeding off of him and he's just like pointing out everything, you know, just like, and that's the thing with crowd work is like once you got one thing going and it's like a packed room,
Mm-hmm.
it's really hard to like have the momentum like halt, like
Yeah.
you just like keep going. And I think what might have happened is like he probably like just kept going for like half an hour. And then he got off stage and he was like, dude, I think like that's a special. You know what I mean? Like, I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure we could just use that and use that as a special. Like, I'm not saying that's what happened, but I wouldn't be surprised if that
Yeah.
happened.
And also the base of knowledge that you have to have, like of background, to be able to make, like he made a couple like geopolitical jokes and some other things, like the background of knowledge that goes into
Yeah.
that, to me was like super impressive. Have you had you've had those nights as well? I would think of just everything's rolling for you and everything's going like amazing. Can you describe sort of what that's like?
Dude, it's truly the best feeling in the world. Like, it's, it's, I've never done heroin. I've never done like those kind of drugs or whatever, but it is so euphoric because the crowd is just like, they just adore you. But it's also this like eruption in the room. It's this just like, it's a palpable energy. Energy is not something you can see, and it's very rare that you can feel energy, but you actually feel like a rush going through your forearm. You can hear like the vibrations of the room and and like the chairs moving and the size of the laughter. So it is incredible. It's an incredible feeling. And it's also, when it's over, you're like, what the fuck was that? You know, you're just kind of like, whoa, like, did that actually happen? It's an out of body experience for sure.
Whoa.
Because you're so in the moment and you're so present. So you're just kind of, you're not thinking, you're just doing. It's kind of like soccer, right? Like, if you're thinking about what move to do or like what leg you should use to use, like, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
But when you have that out of body experience where you're just kind of like dribbling, you don't need to think, and you're just kind of like, you're doing the move before you have to think about doing the move. You're in flow, like,
Yeah.
it's a very powerful feeling. It's actually the feeling that gets you addicted to the art form, which is obviously a blessing and a curse, you know.
Yeah. Addicted, huh?
I mean,
So
yeah,
like,
like I remember having a set like that not so long ago, and I just remember coming home and my girl was home, and I just looked at her and I was like, holy shit, that felt good, you know.
it kind of drives you to be better almost in a cool way. It's like you got it, like you want your material to be good enough that you can continue to like make that happen. It's almost like a weird drive, like in a good way, I guess, that you're driven to make it better and better and better so you can keep having those sorts of nights.
Yeah, I think that's the thing with stand up. It's like, it's never enough, right? It's, you know, you get these experiences of the crowds just erupting and just having those long laughs, and it feels really good in the moment. And then you get off stage and you're just like, okay, I want that again. Let's do that again. Where can I do that again? Let's do that again. And I think it's cool and it's good and it drives you. But I think also sometimes, you know, you have to kind of like be grounded
Yeah.
and also realize like there's more to life, and you can't just chase that high every time. So
Yeah.
yeah.
That's good that it keeps you. Yeah. That's good that you have that perspective, I think, because anything can get like that to the point where it's too much and it's unhealthy and stuff. Um, I want to shift gears just a little bit.
Yeah.
Are you at the point in, I would assume now, where you kind of like stand up is your living, or because you in the special you're talking about having another job, but are you good? Are you good with stand up, or you are also working?
No, I'm working, man. I'm working. I think it's going to take a long time, I think, for me to feel like comfortable to be able to do this full time. It's a tough industry to like make good money in.
Yeah.
You
So
know, I
that
have
so
like,
that was going to be the question, is like,
yeah,
how much does it take for you, like for somebody to be really like good, like you're like, okay, I'm good to just do stand up full time and only that, like, and be comfortable. Because I know people will be like, yeah, I'm doing stand up full time, but like they're living in their van and eating only ramen noodles, and it's like, well, are
right.
you really like doing okay? It's like, not really.
Yeah, I think the um I think the like business model is evolving, And for me, I'm like toying with the idea of like doing a podcast soon. But I think as long as you have subscribers,
Mhm.
either they're annual or monthly or whatever, and you have like an X amount that you're guaranteed for them to pay you a specific amount because you're offering them value,
Right.
offering them like a funny value. Like that's when I'll start feeling comfortable to quit my job. When it's like, okay, I have like X amount of people who value my work to the point where they'll pay. And then on top of that, it's okay, when I do a show, X amount is going into my bank account because of like the way we promoted that show.
Mhm.
And I think what's exciting about all that is like that, like I don't need the industry to approve me or whatever to go full
Mhm.
time. I think in the past it was like that, but I think people like Schultz, right? They've kind of proven like, no, like the internet will decide whether or not you can make this a living, make this as a living. And I
Yeah.
think that that's really encouraging. So just to kind of tie everything up is like my first step was like, I want to drop an hour of stand up, put it on YouTube, and I just want to know if people actually think I'm funny. I want to know if the world thinks I'm funny. And like seeing that it's like growing organically and I get comments and stuff and people say, yo, you're funny. Now I'm at a mindset of great, people enjoy what I have to say. Let me now figure out a way to make it consistent. And then the third step is let me figure out a way to monetize it.
Yeah, for sure. When I watched the your special the first time, in my head I was like, I wonder if he's only doing this like full time. Like I couldn't tell. Like with some people you can tell it's like this is what
Mm.
they do, and other people like you're like no, they're just doing this for fun on the side. And I couldn't tell with you, and I didn't. So that was why I wanted to ask, because I
Yeah.
don't know. I have no idea what it takes to actually like quit your like your day job or whatever and do that. I know I would say it's risky, to say the least. But so how does it work when you're like, so when you do a set at like a comedy club or whatever, how does that sort of work? And obviously, I don't give out whatever details you can or feel comfortable with, but like when you get paid, like how does that sort of work for comedy?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I think so. There's different kind of like sets that you do where you're getting paid. So, I'll perform at like New York Comedy Club on a weekly basis, and they kind of like pay you a little bit to just, they kind of they pay you for doing the act, right?
Hmm.
That night, and it's awesome. Like it's really rewarding. Some clubs don't even pay. Um, but then there's like the shows where you're at a comedy club for like a week, right? From like Wednesday night to Sunday night.
Hmm.
And they'll pay you for the entire week. I think also there's the element of like private shows, right? And that's typically where it's like you get the most pay, where it's like a company or whatever will ask you to do like an hour during, I don't know, some like holiday party or something,
Yeah.
and they'll pay you like corporate money, and you're just like, damn, that was awesome. Like they're the worst shows to do, but they pay the
Yeah, I've
best.
heard that.
Yeah, they're like literally the worst shows ever, but at the end of the day, you get that check and you get the hell out of there. Um, yeah, dude, I've done a few of those, and it's like, bro, like, yeah, it's like it's always a horrible feeling when the like a lot of people in the audience, they don't even know what's going on. They're just kind
Yeah.
of like, they're like, I'm at my company's holiday party, why is there a stranger talking about working out like on stage right now? Like, I just want to get some food and get drunk and talk to my friends.
Yeah.
It's but yeah, that's kind of like the different kind of systems. And then you have the whole like podcasting and Patreon, right? Like there's that money stream there. But I think the interesting thing with the comedy industry is that it's growing or it's changing so fast. Like it's just ever evolving. And it's hard to keep up sometimes.
Yeah. That makes sense as well. Even just in the last like 2 years, I've noticed it changing with the amount that I've been consuming, and like the deeper I go into like different rabbit holes down YouTube, the more people I like. 2 years ago, I never would have found you at all. Like I wouldn't have even known you existed. But now it's like you popped up right on the screen and you're accessible via Instagram. And for all 20 people listening to this, don't go message him. I mean, you can if you want. I don't know. But but yeah, like I don't know. It's just a changing what like they're accessible now. Like you're responding in the YouTube comments, and like before you would see the special on Netflix or even before that Comedy Central, and you would have no way to like know who this person is really. And it's cool, like I said before, like it allows me, for me anyways, to be more invested in it and want to, like I want to see you do well because we've had this conversation and I've seen your special and like and that sort of stuff, and like I don't know, do you know what I'm saying? Kind of.
100%. I think, this is the last time I'll reference him, but like Schultz, I think, said it the best. He said something like, the industry gives you moments and like your fans give you a career. So like, like the end, like, yeah, it would be like a dream to do Jimmy Fallon or Comedy Central or Netflix or whatever. Like, yeah, it would be amazing, right? But ultimately, like the thing that sustains you as an artist are your fans that will like pay on an annual basis. And that is really the internet, to allow you to like constantly like put out content or, promoting that you're going on tour. So that's, I think, how the industry has changed in terms of like, you really only need like 10,000 people to pay you like $10 a year.
Yeah.
For you to be like somewhat comfortable, right? That's like $100,000.
Yeah.
And so the question is like, okay, let's cultivate like 10,000 people to like be willing to pay me $10 a year because they just value what I do. And I think that's like a much more healthier focus right now in like the comedy world than like, I gotta be on this, I gotta be on that, I need to be here, because it's like, okay, but like, is that going to allow you to eventually like quit your job and live the standard that you want to live in?
Yeah, it's not as organic also, I feel that way.
Right.
Oh yeah, no, it's good. I think I mean, in my opinion, I don't know if you seems like you agree anyways. It's like this changing for the better, where the comics kind of have the power in their own hands now, and the people can kind of pick and choose who they want to see rather than whatever Netflix pops on the screen.
I think the best part about it is like you don't need it all. Like it's like with Netflix, it's like there's either nothing or Netflix. But I think with the internet, it's like, hey, it's okay if you only have like 10 or 20,000. Like you don't need to win it all. There is no win at all. Like everyone can win, because you only need like a niche audience to live.
Yeah.
So
yeah, no, that makes sense. All right, I got one last sort of subject that I want to ask you about, and then we'll wrap this up. We've been talking for about an hour already, which is kind of wild. With COVID in New York, were you in New York through COVID?
Part of it, yeah. So this is kind of a crazy story. I'll try to be like quick about it, but
I've got all sorts of time.
Okay,
so
cool.
Whatever works.
I was supposed to record my special on March 24th, 2020. So I was in New York City and I was like, all right, I'm ready to do this special. And I was supposed to only record it in San Francisco. And so I flew back home to do the special in San Francisco. And then like the next day I had to cancel it. And I was like devastated, because I was like, I like worked my entire life for this. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
So I was back home. So I stayed home, even though everyone was like, why are you in the Bay Area? Like COVID is like the worst in the Bay Area. And then a month went by and then it was just like a horrible pandemic in New York. So I stayed in San Francisco. And then like around July, I went back to New York and I stayed in New York throughout the entire pandemic. And yeah, like I like started a comedy show at a park, and it got like we had like 100 people come out every Monday, and it was pretty cool. It was like a pretty cool experience.
So that's what I was going to ask is how like New York was closed for a while. So is the park, that's how you were getting your stage time, for lack of a better word?
Yeah, so like the summer of 2020 all the way to like, yeah, the summer of 2021, like it was like basically an entire year pretty much of like performing outdoors. And I was really fortunate. Like I started this thing called Comedy at Cooper with another comedian, Julio Diaz. And it was like a park in our community. And like it was, dude, it was honestly one of the most meaningful things I've ever done, because the intention originally was like, I just want to do stand up. I don't want to lose my craft. I'm going to start this show at the park. So it was very like me.
Mm-hmm.
But then it really evolved into this like community aspect of like people reaching out, being like, why is comedy at Cooper canceled? Like, we really wanted to laugh. Like, we really want to do like it, it brought joy to people at a time that was really, really dark.
Yeah.
And it completely like reset my focus with stand up, because it's so easy as a comedian to be like, I want to be really good, and I want to be famous, or I want followers, or I want to be the funniest comedian. But like you forget, like, isn't the reason why we like are doing this is because it brings joy to people, and shouldn't that be enough for us to feel good? And so I think that was the silver lining among with this whole like COVID thing. It kind of reminded us, oh yeah, people like comedy because sometimes people go through tough times, and like laughter changes the chemicals for them to feel good.
Yeah, definitely. I think, yeah, for sure. I feel like, especially in those places in particular, like with the lockdowns were kind of heavier than, like, I'm near DC, for instance, and like kind of by this time last year, I had kind of not decided I was done with it, but like the masks in the stores, it was like recommendations, and I had got my shots and whatever, and like I've had COVID since, and I'm like, I'm good. I feel like in terms of not giving it to anyone, so like I feel comfortable doing this, and I was kind of just like, I think a lot of people around here are just kind of done with it in that way, but for it lasted a lot longer for you guys, so like I can't imagine, because I had soccer, which was outside. So we would go practice and play outside, and we were able to do that. And I think I was only cooped up inside for maybe 2-3 months.
Mhm.
And I can't imagine having been that for like 2 years. Like I would have gone insane.
It was tough, man. Like I think it was really hard. And then like when the comedy clubs opened up again, a lot of it was very like jarring to all of a sudden like be expected to just like
Be
bring
ready
it,
to,
you know?
yeah, to be
Yeah.
ready to go.
I think what was nice though is like I think comedians, we talked about it with each other openly. And that was really nice too, is like in the green room and stuff, we would be like, yo, like this is fucking trippy. Like, do you feel comfortable on stage? Because I don't fucking feel comfortable. And then
Yeah.
people would be like, no, I feel like this is like my first time doing stand-up. And so I think that was like comforting as well, that people
Mm,
were honest with each other on how we feel about coming back. But it's pretty amazing how quickly you kind of like get back into the flow of things.
mm. That brought up another point. You got time for one more?
Yeah, man, let's do it.
How is the comedy community as like a, I would assume, like in the soccer community, is very, it's a very small world, and I would assume comedy is kind of the same. How does that work from, or not how does it work, but like I know, like listening to Rogan's podcast, for example, like back in the day, like comedians weren't so willing to help each other. I guess it seemed like, because there was a limited number of sitcom spots and a limited number of this and that. But like you were saying, now everyone can win. So have you experienced that sort of the shifting of the comedy community helping each other out and stuff? And if so, like what's your experience been with like working with other comics and kind of just being like, even if you haven't met them in person, it's like, oh, you're a comic, I'm a comic, so we can talk. Like what's your experience been with all that?
For sure. I think in general, like comedians are very open to helping out, like making an introduction or just letting them know, like, hey, this is the person you need to talk to get booked for this thing. Um, yeah, I think a lot of it is like hanging out in the scene and showing a face and building relationships. but it is very like tight knit. It is like a small community. And if I'm being honest, like I think me personally, like I think if I didn't do stand up, I don't think I'm the kind of guy to like hang out late at night or like chill out bars.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it can be kind of challenging for me to like be like ingrained in the scene because, you know, like I like to perform and then I kind of just like to go home and like rest, you know? Um, and so I think that's something that I'm trying to get better at, but also make it natural and not like force
Mm-hmm.
the hang. But to answer your question, like, yeah, like at least like the New York scene it's great. Like comedians are super friendly with each other. And I think there's definitely like a bond there because it's hard, man. Like it is a tough grind for sure.
Are you guys? I'm gonna try and word this in a way that doesn't sound mean, not to you, but generally, and hopefully you understand what I'm trying to ask, and then we can
Yeah.
go from there. But like when you have people that are trying to make it and they're just like not funny at all, like how does that work? Because like there are people that always want to be part of other things, and then like how does that like is there a natural sort of like weeding out process that goes on, or is like is there
Yeah.
sometimes where you kind of got to be like brutally honest with not you, but people are like brutally honest with somebody like, hey man, like you're just not funny, like this is not gonna work, or do you kind of just let them do them? Like how does that situation
Yeah.
work? Because I could imagine that happening fairly frequently.
So here's what I can tell you. When I was in San Francisco and, you know, like every now and then I'll see a comedian and I'll just be like, yo, this comedian is so bad. You know, like in my head, I'll just be like, they're so bad. And then, you know, you fast forward like 10 years later and they're on Netflix
Mm-hmm.
and you're not, you
Yeah.
know? And these are like great lessons to have where it's like, yeah, like someone might be garbage now, but they might progress faster than you, or they might have like the right connection that you don't have. So I think something that I've learned that's like a great life lesson for me with comedy is like, man, you never know. Like, you never know when someone will just flip the switch and just figure it out. You'll never know if someone has like, you know, maybe the comedian's garbage, but they have like a really, really good show that they put on every week that gets like a lot of audience members.
Mm-hmm.
And then like, so they have like a lot of clout. And because they have a lot of clout, they're starting to get opportunities, and these opportunities are making them better. So it's pretty, what I've learned is that it's pretty naive to kind of like make the decision of like, yo, this guy just doesn't have it. Like this guy sucks. Cause man, like sometimes people, you think they haven't figured it out, but they're actually like figuring it out because they're allowing themselves to bomb first and then eventually like get funny, but they're talking about what they want to talk about.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Also, you see people kind of enter into comedy at all sorts of walks of life as well. So like people, older people come in, sometimes like those people will be super funny. Like sometimes, I mean, yeah, like there was somebody on Kill Tony, this like crazy lady, I think her name was Miss Amy O or whatever, and she's literally insane. But it's hilarious every time like that she goes on because it's just chaos all the time. And like maybe she doesn't get a Netflix special, but like that doesn't mean that she can't be funny there in her niche as well.
And I think also it's like, again, it's like what success is different for every comedian.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, maybe someone who you think is not funny, they might have like 1 million subscribers on YouTube. And you're just kind of like, all right, like, I don't think this guy's funny, but I mean, the guy is clearly a working stand-up comedian with an audience and a fan base. He's doing something right.
Yeah.
Um, so it's really like music. It's like sometimes you listen to music and just like, yo, this is garbage music. Like I hate this music.
Yeah.
But you know, these people go on tour and sell out arenas or whatever. So yeah, man, it's totally subjective.
Yeah. feel like that's a good place to wrap it up. I think lesson to be learned is you never know what other people got up their sleeve.
100%.
All right. I appreciate your time. Your special is, where can we find it? It's on YouTube, right? It's called, what's it titled again?
Great enough.
All right. Go check it out on YouTube. We'll put the link down to it down in the description. Absolutely hilarious. Highly recommend it. And now you're going to be working all sorts of new stuff out. Are you going to be touring at all or doing anything like traveling around to different places?
Yeah, so I'm working that out right now. I don't have dates set, but I'm like looking at Minneapolis and Denver and Austin and all that. So I'm trying to be my own like tour agent as well. Yeah, it's not easy, but hopefully I'll have some dates soon in like the second half of the year.
All right, sounds good. Looking forward to it. If you're ever in the DC metro area, I'll try and come and check it out for sure.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Any last nickels?
No, man, I think you've asked very good questions. This was an engaging conversation, so I appreciate it.
Likewise. All right, with that, we will see you guys next time. Bye, everybody. Peace.